Joseph was the seventh of 9 children for Catherine and Joseph Jackson. He was born on August the 29th, 1958 in Gary, Indiana, into an extraordinarily talented family. Raised as Jehovah's Witnesses, the young children were coached by their ambitious father, and soon 5 of the boys, including Michael, had formed a family singing group.
He was in a whole another world when he's on stage. Even as a young kid, you can tell that they followed him. Even at 6 and 7 years old, you could see them, you go to see them on the show. Michael was in charge.
The brothers were integral to the whole thing, and I'm sure teen girls of the day each had their own favorite Jackson, but you know, Michael, I don't think the spotlight could have gone on anybody but Michael Jackson, even at that point.
I remember one time they did a show at Beckman, and Michael was just, man, I knew right then and there. That little boy, and he's younger than I am, but he was just doing things that a little boy is not supposed to do. You know, I mean, they were polished. Back in the 60s, I think most families, Joe Jackson, my father as well, all of them worked in the steel mill. The thing that Joe Jackson did was able to bring his family out of poverty and have them do something that they love to do. I take my hat off to him. He brought them out of a situation that almost everybody in Gary and in Chicago and Detroit region was going through.
They performed in all sorts of local shows, talent contests and schools, including one at Beckman High School where Jermaine was a pupil. By 1963, Michael, with his distinctive high vocals, was the lead singer of the family group.
Well, we did a show with the Jackson 5, and also, I said we went to the same school, so you pass them up and down the hallway. I didn't know who they were until they dropped their first 45. The name of it was Big Boy, on an independent label called Steel Town. When that record was released on a local radio, you know, local around Chicago, Indiana area, everybody flocked and bought it. I mean, by the droves and bought it.
After the success of Big Boy, the Jackson 5 were snapped up by Detroit's legendary record label Motown. Here they found themselves under the wing of Motown founder and president Berry Gordy.
The label had moved from being this really reliable, pop machine almost, cranking out hits, to a situation where we had artists like Marvin Gaye, who were beginning to expand their horizons, and Stevie Wonder, who were getting away from the strict pop kind of thing. And it was clear that, Motown was slowing down in that way. It wasn't, there wasn't a top 10 hit every week anymore. And along comes the Jackson 5, and Berry Gordy with his magic touch.
So the Jackson family came to Motown at the perfect time.
First time I heard I Want You Back, I just loved it, and I just loved the sound of it. It had a sound that I had never heard before.
I knew they were going to make it. It would have been Motown, it would have been somebody else, but they just had that oomph, and what really set them apart was the showmanship. At the age of 6 years old, Michael was doing splits and doing things that, doing the James, back in the day, you used to do the James Brown. It used to be a dance style of James Brown. You wiggle your feet, do like James Brown. He had it down. So yeah, I knew they were going to make it.
Motown headquarters moved to California in 1969, so the Jackson family had to follow. Now based in Encino, California, the Jackson 5 faced a lot of criticism in those early days.
The critics all hated the Jacksons because they were bubblegum. There were a lot of protest songs going on, and they said that you know, because of the Vietnam War and all of the civil rights, and they said the Jacksons weren't relevant.
You're always on my mind. Find another place to hide.
They weren't singing about war. They weren't singing about protest. They were singing about love. I want you back. Stop the love you save. ABC. I never can say goodbye. Well, we've since discovered how relevant they became. They said they weren't going to last. So, once again, the critics were wrong.
Another brother, Randy, replaced Jermaine, and the Jackson 5 became the Jacksons, because Motown retained the copyright on the band name. Jermaine, who had recently married Berry Gordy's daughter, remained on the Motown label as a solo artist. Despite injecting new life into the label, the Jackson 5 Motown marriage was short-lived, and they soon signed a new deal with CBS offshoot Epic.
Well, as you recall, the war ended, I believe, in 74, 75. The troops, for the most part, pulled out of Vietnam. 75 was the year that the Jacksons left Motown. 75 or 76. And moved to CBS.
The move left the brothers free from the restrictions that came from carrying the Motown banner, and the real credibility began.
What was significant was to be able to freely write the songs that you want to write and to grow as songwriters. They didn't want to continue writing, back then we called it bubblegum. They didn't want to continue writing that. To me, it was just the second coming of the Jacksons. It was just a more mature Jackson. It was writing, producing, you had a chance to hear and listen to what they wanted to do. And at that particular time, I think that's how Michael developed his skills as far as being a good songwriter and producer.
At this point, the world began to see the extent and depth of Michael's musical creativity.
I'd like to say thank you very much.
What Motown taught Michael Jackson is melody and the way rhythm works with melody in a pop format. You know, he was a guy who, because of what Motown was groomed with a pop sense, and that's something that you know, shone through on Thriller and all those big albums that he went on to make in the 80s and 90s.
I said you need to leave my dreams